That's okay, that's gonna happen. Okay.
So I'm sure that everyone is familiar with the famous painter Pablo Picasso. This is his most famous piece of art, Guernica. It is the most Google searched image on the internet. However, I'm sure that few of you actually know what the image is describing and what the message is behind it. So this fact is actually true for many pieces of art in history. I'm currently a Spanish 4 student, and throughout my 4 years of Spanish, I've learned both about Spain's culture as well as the artists that I'm going to be talking about today. So Spain's heritage can be accredited to 3 artists, which are El Greco, Diego Velázquez, and Pablo Picasso. So I'll begin by talking about El Greco. I'll go through his background and I'll talk about the aspects of his art. And then finally, I'll go over one of his most influential pieces of art, in my opinion. So this is El Greco. His birth and death dates aren't known. However, we do know that he studied in both Italy and Rome, and he finally settled down in Spain to begin his career. And he was commissioned by Spanish churches and cathedrals, as well as royalty. And the book El Greco from the series Meet the Artist, written by Melody from Rosen Publishing Group, shares that El Greco's first job in Spain was to paint for Santo Domingo el Antiguo, and that the works he was commissioned to do here kickstarted his career. So stark features of El Greco's art are that they captured history, and which was both historical scenes and the religion at the time. He painted famous figures, and his art often depicted elongated figures and long necks whenever he did portraits. Another feature of his art was dramatic lighting, so light was often used to represent pureness and dark represented evil, and he would contrast those two. So we've discussed El Greco's background and the significant features of his art. Now let's take a look at how these aspects are reflected in each of his pieces. So this is the disrobing of Christ, and this is the burial of Count de Orgaz. You can see the religious imagery. Christianity was the primary religion in Spain, and you can see the contrast of lighting in the images. And then this is view of Toledo. So my Spanish teacher actually stood at this point in Spain. This is her favorite image or favorite painting ever, and she said that when she stood there, it looked exactly like the painting, down to the buildings and the landscape. You can see the clear contrast between dark and light in the sky, and the painting is most often compared to Van Gogh's Starry Night, with the contrast, detail, and accuracy. El Greco's influence is that he preserves Spain's history with images of Spanish royalty, landscapes, and the religion, and he perhaps influenced other works of famous artists such as Van Gogh. Next, I'll be talking about Diego Velázquez. He was alive during Spain's Golden Age. Similar to El Greco, he was commissioned by the Spanish court, so he painted portraits of Spanish royalty. And one of his most famous works was a painting of the Pope at the time as well. Most of his paintings were portraits of subjects, and what was significant about Velázquez was that when he painted his subjects, he recognized them for what they were realistically. He never altered them to make their proportions fit better. And he was known for treating noblemen, jesters, dwarves, and peasants with the same level of respect and dignity. So this is the painting Las Meninas. It depicts the Spanish princess at the time. And according to Foucault's Philosophy of Art, a genealogy of modernity by Joseph Tank, published by Continuum, the painting also includes King Philip IV and Queen Maria Anna at the time. But the genius of the painting and why it's so famous is that Diego Velázquez painted himself into the painting, and just having the whole scene incorporated was kind of new for painting at the time. He's considered the father of Spanish realism, and he was the greatest Spanish painter of the classical period, and he brought life into his paintings with a blend of color, realistic proportions, and accuracy. And finally, understanding the childhood of Pablo Picasso will help us understand and appreciate his art. So he lived through both the Spanish Civil War as well as the Nazi occupation of France, and he's one of the world's most recent artists that are famous. Hunterdon County Cultural and Heritage Commission estimates that 350 of his pieces were stolen and claimed by other artists, which is far more than any other artist in history. And a quote by Pablo Picasso is, "Bad artists copy, good artists steal." And because of his experiences, each of his works depicted emotion and pain, and they also began to incorporate Cubism, which was a style that he invented based on geometry and shapes. So Apollinaire Guillaume et al. Defined the purpose of Cubism as, quote, "the task of the viewer when standing before the canvas to put this puzzle into various spatial views together into a whole," unquote, in their book Cubism. Originally, paintings did not conform to the style of Cubism by Picasso. These paintings were often critiqued for their use of negative space, which is a concept of having a plain background to put the focus on the subject. And as a result of the criticism, Picasso founded Cubism. So features of Cubism are unnatural-looking figures, distorted objects, and the paintings are often described as surrealistic. And now that you know about, or now have a better understanding of Pablo Picasso's background and aspects of his art, you can begin to understand the meaning of the painting Guernica. So the distorted image depicts the Spanish city Guernica. It was painted during Spain's Civil War, and it depicts the city being bombed. It represents the senselessness and brutality of war. He used it to criticize how the Spanish government dealt with the Civil War, and his art was considered his voice. So in conclusion, I've described the way El Greco's art has preserved aspects of Spain's history. I've explained how Diego Velázquez's paintings demonstrated his brilliance and reformed art, and how Pablo Picasso's surreal art was used as a voice of the people in the face of injustice at the time. Spain has a long, complicated history. However, with a comprehension of its art, we can begin to understand how it has developed into the country that it is today.